from the Social Care Future inquiry, where a lot of people who draw on social care were describing a kind of fairly different reality for themselves, in which the support or services that they were receiving were often struggling to prioritize those things that were most important to them. People were often in situations where those things kind of weren't accessible, or people had very little choice about the supports and services they received. And so we identify this kind of gap between what we all want from home and what people's experience often is. And then in the first breakout session in the morning, around people living in their own original homes, as it were, we talked about why that might be, why people's experience is like that, what we saw as some of the challenges and obstacles, and started to think about what might be some of the solutions. But this afternoon, we want to focus on that much more. You won't be surprised, Tim, that commissioning came up a bit this morning. You see, we've got Helen Sanderson here, so she's primarily responsible for raising the commissioning issues. No, I'm only joking. We did have a number of commissioners with us in the morning as well, who were all expressing that they wanted commissioning to achieve the things that people were describing as their aspirations in the morning, but pointing to some of the struggles and challenges they're experiencing in trying to do that. Obviously, money came up a bit because it's a bit of a problem, isn't it? But we primarily talked about issues other than money, I think it's fair to say.
That's
really helpful. All right, as a quick catch up for you?
It's super helpful. I'll try not to answer it now, but I think, yeah. When you said you had other commissioners and they were kind of wanting to to do that, I was going to say, well, why haven't they? But probably shouldn't say there's the challenge.
In this session as well, Tim. So I guess they might answer you that question. I hope, folks, so hopefully that was a useful kind of catch up for yourselves in terms of where we've been during the day and where we're going. But I'm going to hand over to Isaac now to introduce the next bit.
Hi, everybody. And once again, thank you all for joining. We have two session listeners, which are Tim and Helen, who Helen joined us this morning. Tim, welcome. I probably am going to go with Tim first and then Helen. And really this afternoon, what we want to do is look at building on this morning's issues and ideas. How do we move forwards? What opportunities, glimpses for a better future can be possible, and what actions can we take? So I'm going to ask each listener to reflect on those. And Tim, over to you. Do you want to introduce yourself and then reflect on what we've asked?
Yeah, so for those that don't know me, I'm Tim Baverstock. So I'm Deputy Director of Adult Social Care down in Somerset, in the southwest. I would hope, and as Martin was alluding to, I'm also Lead Commissioner down in Somerset. So yeah, please don't criticise me for that. What I would say is that I hope that some of you will be aware that Somerset is quite an innovative county. We do have many different approaches that we're looking at in terms of how we support people. Most of them, thankfully, led by people themselves rather than led by me or my teams. And I think when it comes to supporting people in their own home and kind of answering your initial kind of question, Isaac, I think that is the key. Is I've never quite understood why, whether they be health or care commissioners, feel that they can provide templates of care, ways of looking after people, ways of supporting people that they think are right, without them being led by the people themselves. And that's why I quite enjoy being in Social Care Future gatherings and other similar kind of gatherings. And I think what we need to understand is what our people want. It won't always be the same thing. I take your point, Martin, earlier on around having two different groups and how you've split this, but actually we have very similar in Somerset, where we have many people who actually want to live maybe in a shared setting or in some kind of shared support setting, and then we have equally many other people who just want to live independently or with their family, or however it may be. But that illustrates the point that it isn't one size fits all. I won't go on too much in my opening dialogue, Isaac, but I'd be really keen for us to explore how things like personal budget, not just in social care, but in other elements, can help do that and help support that for people in their own home, if that's appropriate. But I'd also like to, if you give me the chance later on, to maybe talk around some of the things we've done in Somerset. So we've had clients, and why wouldn't they have their own mortgage, buy their own property in conjunction with their family, etc. And I think there's many different ways to achieve what it is that we want to achieve. So I will let you hand over to Helen, I'm sure, first of all. And hi, Helen, again.
Thank you, Tim. And Helen, over to you.
I think that there's some things that we can all be part of, which is when we're planning our own lives or supporting other people to plan, whether that's the role of a social worker, a friend or a family member, using something like the support sequence that makes us think about, could technology help here? How can community help here? How can friends and family help here? So we're not going straight for traditional providers in the way that we think about that. So one small change, if every social worker in the country did that, we'd have a much bigger investment in community and a much bigger investment in technology, and those things feel important to do. I think we should be celebrating what is brilliant about social care future and social care, which is we are able to do work that has a purpose, that makes a difference, which is different to working in Amazon and different to working in Tesco. So I think looking at value-based recruitment that celebrates what's different around purpose and contribution, and that we can bring people from other sectors outside of health and care into this workforce. And I know it's challenging as well, but we have got something very different to offer people, which is love and connection and work that matters. And I don't know many people in Amazon that would say that. So introducing value-based recruitment, whether you are funding your own care, whether you have a personal budget, or whether you're an organisation, feels important. I'd like us to rethink volunteering. I'd like us to move from seeing volunteering as good Samaritans, doing good to other people, to an investment in our own well-being. And I think what community circles are doing around a 2-hour club is to say, wouldn't it be amazing if everybody invested 2 hours a month in their well-being? Because what we know from the 5 ways to well-being is connection and giving help your well-being. So I think there's an opportunity to reposition volunteering as this is the rent for living in communities and on this planet, and that we give back to each other, and actually that increases our well-being. So a simple thing that could increase all of our well-being. Now, Tim, I'm going to be controversial. I think it should be illegal to commission task and time services. I believe that's like commissioning the fire service and only paying them when they're out fighting fires. And I also think that CQC should regulate commissioning, because at the moment there is no influence on commissioners other than trying to balance budgets, which I know is very, very hard. But if we had some greater sense of standards on what was okay about commissioning and what was not okay about commissioning, I think we might be in a different place. And then, of course, the integration stuff that we talked about earlier. So we don't have reablement separated from home care, separated from district nursing, and separated for social prescribing. Thank you. Martin, getting off my soapbox now.
Thanks. So please, folks, as you've been listening to this, 1 or 2 people have started putting things in the chat. Please put more in, because before we break up to discuss this stuff, let's explore some of these things a bit further. Tim, Daphne asks, as a self-funder and a carer, am I included in this discussion? And I'm sure the answer to that is yes. But how do self-funders kind of fit here?
So I think, and just picking up Helen's challenge at the same time, I think, because I think the two are linked. What you need to remember is that commissioners are responsible for conditions across the whole, not just for things that local authority funds, etc. So giving self-funders the right choice, supporting them to make the right options, should absolutely be part of good social care commissioning in an area. You'll be pleased to hear, or kind of slightly pleased to hear, I think, that obviously with the new assurance that's coming along the line for adult social care, commissioning is going to be a big part of that assurance process. So, and it should be CQC doing that. I know they're still working through the details. I kind of welcome that. I think it'll be challenging for us in Somerset, but if they look at the right things, I share your skepticism, Helen, and it links that self-funder point as well, as, you know, if they just look at things like cost, sufficiency in the market, or time and task element, then it'll be a useless exercise. What they need to look at is how commissioners are promoting choice, across how they're developing their markets. And I don't like the phrase markets, but I use it because that's my world, so apologies. And how they're encouraging providers and their staff to think differently. And that doesn't matter whether that's a self-funder or a local authority funded package of care. Just agreeing with Helen, I think we've got a lot of work to do with practitioners, particularly social workers, in terms of are they asking the right questions, Helen, on a lot of occasions, which is why sometimes they get the wrong answers. So I would agree with that. And I guess that perspective of commissioners sitting on high and deciding what are the right levels of care, what are the elements that we need in a, they don't happen in Somerset. Particularly, we very much leave it to individuals themselves. So, you know, we've now got, people will be aware, but we've got we have got the biggest micro provider market in the country in Somerset, and we've only done that by allowing people to have choice. And
could I explore that with you a bit, Tim?
Yeah.
So not everybody will be aware of this. So one of the things that came up in the earlier session was it felt a little bit like one size fits all, you know, so that you didn't have very many options, whether you were supported at home or supported in accommodation with support of some kind. You know, it felt there were very few options. Now, this morning we started with Jane Williams doing a video for us, who's supported by Claudia and other micro providers in Somerset. And many people were saying, you know, how much they liked the sound of that, as it were. But I noticed recently, when the white paper came out, that David Brindle, the former Guardian journalist, was a little bit sniffy, I thought, in one of his responses. So he said, "Oh, well, the white paper just said there are all these other there are all these models, but they're very kind of small scale and niche, and they're not going to become mainstream." And yet you have a lot of people in villages in Somerset providing support on a micro basis. How do you do that? What do people need to do to make that happen?
I think what you need to, and it links to some of Helen's models as well, actually, to be honest, that Helen and her teams have devised. So I think what you need to do is you need to make the conditions right, and hopefully people on this call will understand, and by all means put in the chat if you want to ask any more, is you need the authorities to let go, and that's the only way where you can propagate that. And just to give you an idea of the scale, so we're up to about 20,000 hours now. I'm sorry to talk in hours, but I've got to, because I'm trying to quantify it, but we're up to about 20,000 hours now delivered by our micro provision. They're not mine, they're not directed by me, I don't fund them, I don't tell them how to run their care packages, I don't tell them how to work with the clients. And that's the key, Martin, but the only way you can do it is to promote them. There are lots of, I can be slightly incorrect on, there are lots of sniffy people out there who will call them cowboy carers, or who may well say, well, they're not regulated, so, you know, but actually in Somerset, what we have is we have networks. We're a big county. We have networks where they all come together, they sign up to a quality framework that they've devised with clients and themselves, so that they regulate that quality of care. And I go back to when we started, when I always say, actually, you know, to be honest, some of those micro providers don't provide care at all. They might be doing other things. They might be doing shopping. They might be mowing the lawn. They might be walking the dog. You don't ask for a regulated provision when you ask a gardener to come in, do you, and mow your lawn. And I think, you know, it's about building relationships, friendships, working with people. And I forgot to pick up on Helen's other point, which I would absolutely agree with. If you want a happy workforce and you want people to work in this sector, which we know is a massive problem at the moment, all of our data over the last couple of years tells us that people who support people in their own home get an awful lot out of that when it's a flexible type of support. We've had people from within our county council seconded into traditional care providers during this crisis. And they were ringing me on numerous occasions and saying, Tim, I've got to be at my next call in 10 minutes time, and the journey time is 45 minutes away. That type of provision doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help recruit, doesn't help the people you support because they don't feel valued. And so micro providers helps to move away from that, as does some of Helen's other models, which we're you know, trying to explore with some of our more formal market now around locality-based teams, where I don't tell them what order they need to do their calls in. I don't commission things singly. They need to work with the community and with the clients. So I think there's lots that we can still do, Martin. We're not perfect in Somerset by any means, as you'll know if you look at some of our stats. But we are trying things, and we're trying them because people are asking for it, and that's the way to do it, isn't it? Is to work with what helps support people better.
Thanks, Tim. Could we explore the CQC part a little bit? So I think Liz, it was said, do you like the idea of CQC regulating commissioners? Well, you will have your wish very soon, Liz. They are going to do that like they did before. However, when I talk to people about this, there's some worry about that. There's some worry about how they regulate commissioners, what they think is good commissioning behaviour and bad commissioning behaviour. So that's one issue. But I think, Helen, you've probably got issues as well about the role of the regulator in supporting or hindering the growth of new, flexible, better models. So can we explore both those issues a little bit? Tim, if CQC is going to commission you, going to regulate you, yeah. What do you think are the key things they should be regulating on, or assuring? I think is the word, isn't it? Helen, what do you think CQC need to do differently from what they do now to make it possible for things like wellbeing teams, micros, and others to flourish? Let's go with Helen first.
CQC recently did something called their sandbox innovation, where they invited different kind of innovative non-traditional providers, including cooperatives, to work with them on how CQC would need to change. And I must say that, and I think they've done great work there. I think one of the challenges, well, there's two things from my perspective, and I'm suddenly become more conscious that this is being recorded. One is not all the inspectors necessarily work from the spirit of CQC, and there's lots of myths and legends that says actually, staff have got to have 6 weekly supervision. Well, that's not in the law, and it's not in the regulation, and it's not in the CLOEs, and they actually say you need to demonstrate that staff are well supported. But there's this myth amongst providers who believe that. And there's some inspectors that behave like that's the truth. And then in their personal provider information return, which providers have to submit 6 weeks before they're inspected, it asks how many supervisions have you done over the last year, which kind of reinforces the view that supervisions are the right thing. So I think going back to and stripping out all of those elements that aren't directly what the CLOEs say, which gives people more flexibility. So I'm very happy to demonstrate that my staff are well supported. We did that without doing supervision at all, and we got outstanding for well led. So it's also making sure that CQC is sharing and celebrating organisations who are delivering the CLOEs but doing it in a very different way.
Right, so that's something I think that's an issue that we're going to have to take forward as part of our movement, really, because if we're concerned that regulation is sometimes hindering the growth of the stuff that we want to see, we're going to need to find a way of engaging with CQC and considering with CQC things like if some of their inspectors are not following the spirit of their policies, etc., what they can do about that. So that's a kind of practical issue that won't be easy to sort out, but something that we'll need to engage with, I think. Tim, can we come on to you? And what if CQC were going to say these are the 3 or 4 things we're going to assure commissioners on? What would your favourites be?
Well, I'd like them to understand the locality they're inspecting to start off with, Martin, because everywhere's going to be different. Yeah. And I think there's a really good comment in the chat actually just around, and it's absolutely what I would agree with. If you look at the changes that were made to some of the CQC inspections of some regulated settings and care homes, etc., probably just pre-pandemic, but now, post as we go forward as well, they've only just cottoned on to the fact that really what you should be asking is you should be asking the people that are receiving the service, what their views on the care and
Tim, can you just hang on a sec?
Yeah.
Daphne, just to say, I've seen your hand, so as soon as Tim finishes, I'll bring you in if that's okay. You don't have to keep it up there. Yeah. Go on, Tim.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, no worries. So I think, so my first ask of CQC is if they're going to inspect commissioning is you need to talk to the people, self-funders as well as local authority funded people who want to and require using services. So whether they will do that, I share Helen's slight skepticism in that I think from what I've seen so far, it could be quite I can say this, can't I? A tick box exercise if we're not careful. And I'm really worried about that. So my answer to you, Martin, is it needs to be much more of a conversation, which I know is really difficult for regulators, but they have moved in the right direction in some of those other settings. So I am hopeful that they could do that. And I'm just picking up Luke's point in the chat as well. We have gone back to central government. I've been part of some of those groups that were offshoots of some of the things that Helen describes in terms of working on the white paper and some of those other elements. And actually regulation, the type of care that we've introduced in Somerset, some of it, as Martin said, some of it features in the white paper, but we need to continue to shift that power base. And again, if I can say one thing that I think is really important, Martin, for this movement is certain big companies have the ear of the government with regard to care and care policy, or have done historically, and we need to shift that power base back to people like you've got on this call here, who receive those services.
We'll come on to that then as an issue. Daphne, just before I bring you in, one thing to say here is that we not overstating this, but we have every 2 weeks we have an hour with Kate Taroney and some other people. And I think we can open up a dialogue on these issues, which I'm sure Kate, we could say to Kate, this is really important. Will you make it happen? So the issues that we're raising today, I think we can probably go to Kate and say, okay, let's work out how we're going to work together on some of these, Kate. She's already invited us and others to be involved in the assurance development process, which we will take up. But some of the other issues as well, like the ones that you're raising, Helen, clearly you've had a go at raising those previously, haven't you? And we need to keep pushing that. Daphne, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Right, come in.
In my past career, I was part of the Inspectorate for Education in London, the ILEA, in fact. I used to visit what they called special needs, which was homes, sheltered accommodation, the full gambit. What I can say, and having also been on the receiving end of the CQC in my doctor's practice when I was on the patient participation group, inspection improves services, especially if good practice is shown. And I find I was pleased when I heard about the CQC and I recognize the process that they're trying to do in improving things. Certainly locally, CQC reports on residential care have highlighted some appalling situations. And, so I just think it can improve, but of course it depends on what the specification is for the visits. And I'd say that about commissioning, because I was involved with Carers Gloucestershire and I was a trustee, and commissioning is very much dependent on specification of it and the interpretation of a contract, and that can vary so much. So I just felt I needed to say that inspection is an opportunity to improve services.
Thanks, Daphne. I think most people would agree with that, and also with your point about specification. I looked at some research recently which suggested that it was possible to, so I got a bit of echo, it was possible to get a CQC outstanding in residential care without the things that we were talking about this morning being identified as present. things like people being able to have contact with the people that they loved when they wanted to, and to do activities and spend time doing things that gave them purpose and meaning. So I think I absolutely agree with your point about specification, and that might be another thing we need to engage with Kate and colleagues on. Thank you. Sorry, Daphne, do you want to come back in?
Interpretation.
Yeah. Say again.
It's interpreted.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Okay. All right. Tim, were you going to say something? Sorry.
No, I wasn't. I just well, what I was going to say is I completely agree. I'm welcoming inspections. I might regret saying that in a few years' time, mightn't I? But I think it's really important. But I will go back to that point is we've got to be inspecting the right things and doing it in the right way. And I think, Martin, if we are going to feed back some of these elements, I'm pleased to say that the conversations I've had so far have very much put people at the center of inspections, and indeed have, in terms of the commissioning side of the inspection, are putting an onus on, are you able to co-produce, are you listening to the right people? And if that happens, I would welcome that. My worry is that it could just become a numbers game. It could just become something around, well, actually, Tim, you're failing as a commissioner because you're struggling to provide enough care, for example, which would be an easy thing to label at me at the moment. So I think it's what they're going to inspect, Martin, and what the nuance is what I was going to say. But otherwise, I absolutely welcome it. I think it will call out some really poor practices in certain areas. It's not just about contractual practices, it's also about how you go about developing services, but I think it will call out those people that are well behind the curve in terms of particularly home care, I would suggest, bringing it back to this conversation. So I think it's important, and I say I welcome it until they arrive on my doorstep.
Thank you. Helen, I'll bring you in. I just wanted to say that it's interesting, isn't it? A white paper on social care came out a couple of weeks ago. Met, I think, a reasonably sceptical response from many people, mostly on the grounds that it didn't seem like there were the resources attached to its ambition. But it was interesting to me that they pretty much took nearly all of Think Local Act Personal's Making It Real I statements around how social care should operate and put them in the white paper to say, we think this is what should happen. So even though I share people's skepticism, I think things like that possibly help us in our arguments with Kate and others to say this is what should be assured. Helen.
I remember naively having a conversation with Sir David B and Andrew Sutcliffe when I was starting wellbeing teams and asking if they could change the regulations for self-managed teams. And they pointed out that regulations are actually enshrined in law, and therefore it's not possible to change the law that quickly. The CLOEs are reasonably flexible. Daphne's right, it's interpretation. So it's actually making sure that the inspectors are asking the questions that make sense in line with the CLOEs and the law. And also if CQC could embrace an additional role, and great inspectors do this, of sharing good practice. So saying, you're having conversations with people that don't talk about what matters. Here are some organisations that are doing that really, really well. I suggest you contact them about that. So I think CQC seeing their role as not just inspecting, but sharing great practice would help us enormously.
Thanks. I'm just looking at one or two of the recent comments in the chat. So Luke asks, Tim, are you feeding what you're doing and the way you're doing it back to government? So in the future, there can be a wider trial. It's really good what you're doing. Luke, if you want to come in and say anything about that in a sec, please do. Liz, the regulator needs to listen to us, the people who draw on care. Tim, you talk about the importance of the availability and quality of healthcare in people's homes.
Do you want me just to supplement
go
on that, Martin? Just really quickly, and I'll be very brief. When we talk about personalised care, it's always easy to default to social care because it's very much our world and always has been. But actually, personalised care is across health and care support planning, and I think that's been proven in other countries, and I think we've got some catching up to do, can I put it politely, around personalised care in health settings. Personal health budgets were hailed, however many years ago it was, as the answer to this, but they're not. They have the same issues that some people have with direct payments around, you've got to keep every receipt, even for the, even for the 2p you spent on something. So I think, I guess my point is there's two points. One is, can we free up people to have more choices as around their healthcare needs at home as well? Because again, they're very different to what clinicians sometimes think is right for people. But secondly, have we got the right resources away from acute services to support people properly when they want to stay in their own home? And I think the answer currently is no. And that puts social care providers and social care teams sometimes in some very difficult positions. So it has to be that joint element of support if you want to stay in your own home longer. And I just think we haven't quite got that right yet. Will ICS be the answer? Sorry, integrated care systems be the answer to that? Not unless they're embraced and people share the funding differently and work differently on them, would be my suggestion. So sorry, I just wanted to throw that in as well. It's not all about social care.
Yes, that's right. So we're going to have to pay attention to the health elements of this as well. Gary, I see your hand. I'll bring you in 2 secs. Helen, were you going to respond to the points that Tim's making there? No? Is that a real hand or a legacy hand?
I'll take my old hand down. Thank you.
It's an old hand. Right, okay. I never think of you as an old hand, Helen, but there we go. Gary, unmute yourself, mate.
Yeah, I want to say that with the CQC, they should employ people with learning disabilities in that role as well, because they, a bit like an expert by experience, and that they have first-hand experience of having a place of their own. And some of us don't live in like social care buildings and all that. Some of us live in private accommodation and have to fork out a lot of money to pay for our rent. And I live up about 48 steps where I live, 5 flights of stairs. And I'm an epileptic as well as a learning disabled person. And there isn't the support for people like myself who work in a job, and there's no help to help find a nice ground floor place. I like the area because I live near the coast, and yeah, I'm worried about having an epileptic fit up flights of stairs.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more help and support for people on benefits, but for people who work, there isn't.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, that's an interesting one around if you're not kind of formally using social care, as it were, what help do you get around the things that are really important to live in a home in a way you want? On the issue of CQC and experts by experience, I might be wrong about this, Gary, but I thought they had a reasonably significant program of experts by experience, including people with learning disabilities, that are part of their process. You might know more about this than me, but that's certainly something I'd be happy to explore with them to see how that's working. Tim, were you going to come back on?
Yeah, I was going to make that point and ask the same question as you, actually, because I'm not clear whether how well that's working or not, as the case may be. But I also wanted to say, Gary, your first point was absolutely spot on. There's this assumption that people with learning disabilities and other conditions are all somehow living in social care settings or something. Well, actually, they're not. They absolutely, make their own choices and have their own lives and may not even touch the system. And I think that's a really, really important point, because I don't think people grasp that sometimes. And then very, very quickly, and Martin's heard me say this before, so I won't labour the point, but the best service that I've been involved in developing in over the last couple of years, and I've called it a service, so I've already fallen into the trap, but is some mental health provision in Somerset, and it was completely designed by experts by experience I watched those experts by experience absolutely eat clinicians for breakfast. It was fantastic to watch. They told them what they needed. They told them what would make a difference. And it was just, well, to be honest, it was an absolute delight to be a part of. And again, I wouldn't say we cracked it yet, but we've now got a really open mental health offer in Somerset, and that is solely down to those experts by experience. Otherwise, all of that extra money would have got spent on clinicians trying to find other clinicians who don't exist, by the way, in the labour market, to try and work in the same way as they had done for years. So I can, Gary, 2 really good points, to be honest.
Thanks, Tim. We're going to go do some breakout stuff in a minute, but before we do, let me just ask Tim and Helen a couple of impossible questions. I think in different ways, both of you have in your own work and experience and in places that you've been, have found ways in which things are quite different, can be quite different. So let's focus on commissioners just for a moment. I know Helen will enjoy that. In a few places, and on the call today, there've been commissioners saying they really want to change what they do. Tim, you've described stuff that other people also describe as really good in Somerset. The large number of micros that you've got in those villages in Somerset. Most people look at that and say, wow, look at that. Helen, you're working in Thurrock with folks who are supporting a really different approach to supporting people at home. They're putting the money into it and experimenting with it, isn't it? Aren't they? What do we do to get more people doing this stuff? Why aren't more people doing it, and what can we do to get more people doing it? I said it was an impossible question.
Go on, Helen, you go first.
I think it's appropriate that the commissioner speaks last year. Let me tell you a tale of 3 commissioners. So wellbeing teams worked in 3 areas, north, south and central England, in the time that we were working. And one of the commissioners was a kind of permissive commissioner, that it was kind of like, if you want to do innovative things, that's great. There's no more money for it, etc. But, we'll do what we can and support you. So they were open to us doing innovative things, but as long as it didn't involve them taking any risks or doing anything differently. And then there was another commissioner that treated us like subcontractors, and that was a really interesting experience for me. So that really big distance between the people who commission the service and the people who deliver them, and I felt that.
An interesting experience, yeah. Okay.
Interesting experience, yep. Yes, subcontractors. And then we had the radical commissioners, and radical commissioners are up at night losing sleep with me, not together of course, but that they are taking the same kind of risks that I'm taking as a commissioner, and they're worrying about it, and we're having conversations about how we're supporting each other. And I think that's the kind of commissioning that we need to see, that really is a different kind of partnership with providers. Everybody talks about partnerships providers, but it's providers that lose the money or lose the staff or take the big risks with CQC. And I don't know many commissioners that do the equivalent for that. So when we're talking about partnership providers, the question I would say is, tell me what risks you're taking and what stress that's causing you. And let's look at the same for me, and let's make sure that we're both in this together, doing radical things together and both taking risks. Tim.
I know that, no, hang on. Oh. I'm going to carry on with you. I know that's what you want, but what do you think might make more of it happen?
What would happen? Brett, well, one of the things that I say a lot is new innovative providers need innovative commissioning, and that's not what we're seeing. So it is the being prepared to take risks. It is the being prepared to join up with your health colleagues and say, how do we do this together? And with community too. But it's a boldness, because I think, well, Tim will tell us, I believe commissioners can do this stuff without any change in the law, without what CQC says, without lots more money.
And that's what 1 or 2 commissioners say to me, too. So is the problem that commissioners just don't want to do it, or they're not all nice like you, Tim? What is it?
I don't think someone would describe me as nice, Martin, but thank you very much. Let me say, let me turn a question around first, and then I'll try and answer it. So my question would be, whose permission are they waiting for? And what are they scared for? And then let me give you an example, and I'll do it cryptically, but you will read between the lines, Martin. This is all about conditions and permissions within systems, authorities, whatever it may be. I have to say, have been very fortunate in Somerset, but I've experienced both ends of the the wedge, if you like, in that, you know, probably about 5 years ago, I was completely released and told I could do absolutely whatever I liked, to be honest. Now, when you have that kind of shift in permissiveness as a commissioner, you're going to work with your providers and the people you support as your allies, because you can. You can't always give them everything that they want, but you can absolutely be honest, as Helen said, honest and upfront with them, and just work with them on developing services, because nobody's going to get hit with the stick. And I've experienced both ends of it. So my answer to the question, Martin, will not be a popular one, but it will be that perhaps we've got some of the wrong people in charge who are blocking some of those ways of working. And I guess I'm also fortunate in Somerset, because people may not realise we have to be very conscious of political demands as well. In that, you know, I've got a leader of the council, doesn't matter what colour their party is, who understands social care. And therefore, you know, and actually waves the flag for social care. So I am fortunate, but that does answer your question, is people have to be engaged and then trust and give permission. And I think I use the word trust lots, Martin, and people always ask me, what is that? The answer is you need to trust the people who use your services. You need to trust your providers and not treat them as competitors or whatever Helen described them as, and work with them on a local footprint. Isn't that much more exciting to do than trying to commission on a national basis and get providers in who you've never heard of, or you know, anyway, but yeah.
So what I'm hearing from you there is that a critical condition is top leadership giving commissioners permission to behave differently. So that's an important condition. Looking at Helen, I think she would probably say, even if that happened, some commissioners might not do it, but it probably, I'm just putting words in your mouth, Helen, but it probably would create a situation where it was more likely to happen, and where over time cultures could change so that more commissioners could enjoy their jobs more than I think often
just
they do at the
moment. Really quickly, Martin, and this will make Helen chuckle and probably everybody else, is I do have a commissioner in my team who, and I encourage challenge from my team, who will constantly challenge me and say, "Blimmin' heck, Tim, you haven't done this on the specification, you haven't done this on the contract, you haven't done this," and you know, I'm not saying he hates working for me, I hope he doesn't, but actually, you know, people do come from different angles, aren't they? Some people are much more black and white than others. What you need to do, Martin, is you need to put the creative people in the right places, and then align them to the people whose support we are designing, who also are generally much more creative than I am. That's what you need to do, Martin. But there's nothing wrong in having a mix. There's a place for everybody, but it does come down to leadership at the end. You're right.
Thanks, Tim. So I'm just going to bring Paul in, and then we will do a bit of breakout then, because I am supposed to be populating one of these blooming Jamboards. Right, go on, Paul.
It was just to say, we've spoken a lot about recruiting people with the right values in the care workforce, but there's a big issue about recruiting people with the right values in commissioning.
That's really interesting.
And having people who use services,
Yeah.
people with expertise, providers, voluntary sector involved in their recruitment, because that's their audience they have to work with.
How about that as one of the assurance elements for CQC? Were people who draw on social care locally involved in the recruitment of your commissioners?
Yeah, I don't want to speak out of turn. We already do that in terms of in our interviews. I wouldn't say on every single occasion, Paul, but thank you for reminding me. But I think in reality, you have to do that. We've also gone as far as having voluntary and community sector people seconded in as commissioners. You know, I hate the word commissioning, by the way, which seems odd because it's in my job title, but I don't see us as commissioners, more facilitators. So yes, I think that's a really good challenge, and one, Martin, you could write that down very succinctly, and that could be, you know, an interesting part of how you look at, you know, because I don't blame people who use services. Are they really interested in or want to understand what a commissioner does? No, absolutely not. That they want to work with the people who are on the ground helping support them.
Right. Okay. So, sorry, this has become a little bit commissioning dominated with these two, and mostly my fault. So I apologise for that. And we came up with a lot of other issues in the first session, didn't we, that were important to achieving the change we want. Gaynor, are you here?
I am, yes.
Hey, so let's have a go at doing breakout rooms and Jamboard, shall we? Is it possible to share the Jamboard just for a second?
Yeah, I can. Just bear with me. Okay, can you see that?
Right, so people have seen the Jamboard earlier on, hopefully, as well. And that gets constructed using a magical method where people type in sticky notes, etc. So what we're going to do now is just maybe 3 breakout rooms, do you think, Gaynor, with the numbers we've got?
I've done 2. I built 2.
2 is fine.
3
yeah,
might be
too
too small.
Yeah, let's go for 2 breakout rooms then. What we're asking you to do is kind of answer the questions that we've asked Tim and Helen, thinking about the issues that we raised this morning. What can we do to grab opportunities or unblock challenges? And what can we do to influence others that we need to influence to play their part in this? Does that make sense? So we started to identify some things that we wanted to change. So give us some examples. What can we do to try and make this happen? What can we do? Who do we need to influence to do what? Does that make sense? Yep. And we're looking for 3, roughly speaking, 3 ideas about how to grab opportunities and unblock challenges, and 3 about who we need to influence to do what. Yep. So in each of the breakout rooms, which will last for about 20 minutes, just about 20 minutes, we need somebody to volunteer to be the reporter. And when you come back, Gaynor will show you how to put these ideas onto the Jamboard. Is that right, Gaynor?
Yeah, that's fine. If we can just get someone to take notes and just come up with the top 3, and then we can build on the Jamboard that we did earlier using the link.
To make this quicker, I wonder whether we put Helen and Tim in separate ones and they volunteered to be the recorders. Is that all right? Sorry, I'm just being so bossy, aren't I? We're a bit short on time.
Yeah, well volunteered, Helen. Well done.
It's like an army volunteering process, isn't it?
That's what I'm told, yeah.
You are in
right.
separate rooms, so.
All right, okay. So it'll be a bit random. You'll find yourself asked to just click something to say, yes, I want to be in this, I'll be in this room. But it's like magic. And then after 20 minutes at 3 o'clock, we'll all come back and we'll share what we've come up with.
Cool. Just forgive me, Martin, because I can't remember. Will those questions stay in the chat so we can see them?
Is that all right, Gaynor?
Yeah, they should do. They should do.
If they don't, just ask and we'll put them in.
Cool, thank you.
All right, so Gaynor's going to wave her wand and you'll go into a room.
See you later.
Yep.